I built this step stool 10 or more years ago at the Toronto Wood Show. It was a beginner-oriented project at the show, and I was one of the staff, and we would walk kids through a workshop and help them build one of these in like 20 minutes or a half an hour. And at the end of the weekend, I'd made a couple extra that I took home for my own kids, you know, hence the colorful paint scheme on this. It's a very beginner-friendly project. There's only 4 boards. You can make it with just a few tools in less than an hour. So for a while now, I've been planning on making us another one, you know, this time out of cherry for like reaching the top of closets and stuff like that. You know, a little match of the cherry that we have in the kitchen and in the bathroom now. But then as I was thinking about it, I thought I would take you guys along and make one out of pine, but taking the minimal tool approach. To build this, you just need a few boards from your local building center. The top and the 2 legs can be cut out of some 1x8 pine. The top is 12 inches long. The legs are each 6 inches high, so you just need a 2-foot chunk, maybe a little bit more than 2 feet. The center support is 10 inches long, so you just need a 10-inch piece of 1x3. And for any complete beginners at woodworking out there, just so you don't get confused, when you go to the building store, a 1x8, in reality, it's 3/4 of an inch thick, 7 1/4 inches wide. A 1x3 is 2.5 inches wide, also 3/4 of an inch thick. That's just the way it is. Let's move on. Now I mentioned minimal tools. So if you buy your wood at the building center, it's already the right width, it's already the right thickness. So I don't need a joiner, I don't need a planer, I don't need a table saw for ripping. I could do everything with a jigsaw and a drill. It'll be a little tricky with the jigsaw because it can wander a bit. But if you use a clamp a board for a nice straight edge, you can still get a pretty good straight cut with a jigsaw. I'm also going to use this basic miter saw for the cross cuts and for the angle cuts. I think those 3 tools are pretty common for beginners to have access to. I'm first going to cut out the top. It needs to be 12 inches long, and my miter saw is not quite big enough to cut it in one go, so I'm going to have to flip the board over partway through to cut the other side. And then the same thing with the side pieces, except they're each 6 inches long. And the last piece to cut out is the center support, which is 10 inches long. Now 10 years ago at the Wood Show, we were interested in teaching the kids things, but we were also interested in speed because we wanted to get a lot of kids through the activity. So we had a lot of jigs and templates. So for the legs, I still have this template for cutting out the angles and the curve on the legs. And we would use this at the show. We would just trace it and then we would take it and follow the lines. But let me show you how to figure it out for yourself. We're going to need to drill 2 holes into the end of the support, and we're going to want to draw a circle here. So I'm going to strike a center line first, and I will draw a center line, and then I'll do the same thing on the other leg. This is a semicircle here, and it is just a little over 2 inches radius. So I'm going to set my compass here. So I set my compass to 2 inches, and really it doesn't matter as long as you use the same setting for all the stools that you make. So now let's go to the middle here, and let me just put the point right there. And let's just put our little pencil in. And there we go. And interestingly, if I compare that to the template, it's not quite the same. I think the template might have been worn from being copied a lot, because this was a template was copied to a template was copied to a template at that show. So I think the template is not quite exact what it was. So of course, if you're going to make a whole bunch of these, you just make the one template and then trace that. I'm just making the one stool now, so I'm just doing it right on the wood. And the top of my template is approximately a little bit over 5.5 inches. And I measured with my speed square. I measured the angle. I lined up the speed square here and I tilted it until it matched. And it's roughly a 7-degree angle. So I'm going to set my miter saw for 7 degrees for cutting these two angles. And I think I'm going to mark from the corners. In fact, I'm not going to measure at all. This original template is a little bit smaller. I'm just going to cut right in from the corners, and then I don't have to measure anything. So yeah, I've set my miter saw to 7 degrees. And then flip it over and do the other side. So we got the two leg angles cut. Now it's time to cut out the curve. Here a clamp is very helpful. You can clamp the board to the edge of your table or workbench. You take your jigsaw and we will go carefully along. And if your curve's not perfect, just remember, this is the part that's on the floor, so nobody's going to see it. And so you got your top, and you got your centerpiece, and you got your two legs. You know, you're just about ready to put this together, but I would recommend first spending some time sanding over the rough edges. Now, obviously, if you have a random orbit sander, I would use that, but pine is pretty soft, so you should be able to just use some 150 grit on a block and you will get it pretty smooth pretty quickly. Curves may be a little bit more finicky. You just have to get in there. And it depends on how you're planning on finishing, you know. If this is a youngster who's building it, you know, you'll get them some paint and let them have at it. So we'll lay out the end piece showing that center line. Take the centerpiece and use that just to estimate how big it is. And then we're going to just make a couple of marks for where we're going to drill to assemble it. I have a countersink bit mounted in the drill, and I'm going to drill out where I need to put some screws. So I took the center line and I transferred it over to the back, and then I'm just measuring 3/8 of an inch on either side, just putting a little tick mark there. That's just to help me with centering the center support when I'm attaching it. Just a little bit of a visual guide there. I'm now going to take these two boards, put a little dab of, actually I'll put the dab of glue on the end of this. And I'm going to stand these boards up, and I'm going to use that tick mark that I just made to make sure it's nicely centered. It's not being attached to the top right now. That's just sort of being used as a place to hold it. Now, one clamp. I put the clamp fairly high so I can get at the lower holes. I just wanted to hold it in position while I attach the screws, and I happen to only have 1 3/4 inch screws, which are fairly long, so I'm going to do a bit more drilling to make sure, because I don't want the wood to split. I'd already pre-drilled holes here, but now I'm just going in with a longer drill bit. And of course I'm using Robertson screws. You can use Phillips because of course I understand most of the people in the US do not have Robertson, but Otherwise use Torx. So let's figure this out. This top is just about 11 5/8. You know what? We don't even need to worry about that. We will just line this up, eyeball it, and then we will put a little line here and a little line there. We will take our square and we will bring that along. We want to be very light here because you're going to want to erase this right away. So don't draw a really heavy line. We're just trying to make a line so we know where to drill. And no, I haven't missed a step. You're right. The lid is loose right now. I just have it carefully positioned. And yeah, that was out of focus. This is future art here. Reviewing the footage, I discovered that the entire clip of assembling the top was out of focus. And unfortunately, that's what happens sometimes when you don't have a Hollywood budget and you're just one guy in your basement shooting video on a camera. And yeah, I can't really take it apart and start over, and I don't really want to do that. So let me bring you in and let's go through this again. I positioned the top on the stool carefully, and then I took this clamp and I gently clamped it to the bench so that it was held tightly in position. And then along these lines that I drew, I measured in 1.75 inches at each spot and made a mark where I could then drill the countersink for each screw. Now you could have done this all at once. I first drilled, then I took the lid off and put glue in, and then I put the lid back on. It's probably smarter to put the glue in first, and so you're not fussing with positioning. And then it's just a matter of putting in your 4 screws, and that's it. And here's the original. One, two, three, four. 4 boards. Simple little thing. And yeah, I fed you all the dimensions as I was going along, but you don't really have to pay attention to them. You want a longer stool? You know, add a little bit of length to this and a little bit of length to that. You want a taller stool? Add a little bit of length to the side. Take these legs and make them a lot longer and a lot wider, and then do the same with the top, and you've got a bench that you can sit on, or make the top really big with a much bigger overhang and you've got a coffee table. So yeah, it's a simple little project. It teaches a lot of little techniques because you're pre-drilling and drilling, you're doing the curve, you're doing the sanding, you're seeing how the parts go together. Great little fun little project for you to do with your kid, or with your Boy Scout troop, or your Girl Scout troop, or with the kids at shop class. So I've got this one done, but I haven't forgotten about the cherry stool that I also want to make. Now, how would I do that differently? Now, I've already jointed and planed the stock on that, and I laminated pieces together with clamps. Next, I'm going to use the table saw to cut my pieces down to size. And instead of the jigsaw, I'll use the bandsaw to cut out the curve in the bottom of the leg, and probably the angled cuts as well. I'll use the palm router to give a 1/8 inch round over on the exposed edges, and I'll probably be using various power sanders to smooth things down. The assembly is mostly the same, except I'll drill deeper holes for the screws, and then I'll use my plug cutter to cut some cherry plugs so that I can fill those holes. And then a little spray lacquer and my cherry step stool is done. But really, this was all about the beginner step stool. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you build one. As always, thanks for stopping by and spending some time in my shop. If you feel I've earned it, please consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.